Hello, this is Kathy Salisbury, the director of the Ambler Arboretum of Temple University. And today I'm working with EarthFest Presents to help you learn a little bit more about the nature around you as we all stay safe through social distancing and get to know our backyards and our neighborhoods and the nature in our neighborhoods a little bit better. So today what I thought I'd talk to you about is how to use a field guide. Because when you visit public gardens like the Ambler Arboretum, a lot of times those gardens have labels on the plants. And so you know what they are. You can read the label and it tells you what they are. And so problem solved, puzzle solved. But when you're walking around, even in your own backyard or around in nature on a hike in natural spaces, sometimes they don't tell you what those flowers are or what the plants are. So I'm going to show you a way that I use to help me figure out what plants are, because even though I have a degree in horticulture and I'm the director of an arboretum, there's so many plants out there. Not everybody can know every plant. And so I often run into plants I don't know. And so here is one of them. And I've looked this one up a couple of times and I never remember who exactly it is. And so this is in my yard, which is kind of a wet woodland area. And you can see there's a little purple violet next to him. That one I know, but this one, I forget who it is. So what we're going to do is talk about using field guides. And a field guide is what I would use to figure out who exactly this is. And field guides are great. They are just what the name says. They are books and guides that you use in the field to help you figure out something. And here is a bunch of them outside here that I have. And field guides come in all different topics. So you can use a field guide for trees. Weeds of the Northeast I find very helpful for wildflowers, because a lot of people think that plants that grow wild all over the place are weeds, but in a lot of cases they're native wildflowers. So I like to have weed identification guides on hand. This book's interesting. It's a field guide to reading the forested landscape. So you can take a look at old stone walls and crazy shaped trees, and it gives you an idea of what might have happened in those forests. So a field guide to insects. Here's one to the night sky. Mushrooms, very important there. A field guide to ferns. That would have helped me in my last video when I wasn't sure what the fern is. So that's a field guide to ferns. Some field guides are designed to as smaller sort of pocket guides. And so here's a wildflower finder here, a berry finder. I have a fern finder too. They're perfect for backpacks. Some of them are waterproof and meant to go with you wherever you go, or stash in the glove box or in the pocket of your car. And this one's a common guide to roadside invasive plants. So you can see here's one that's a guide to wildflowers and winter weeds. So how to identify some plant remnants in the winter. So as you can see, there are all types of field guides available. And the nice thing is that plants don't generally, oh, here's my fern finder. Plants don't generally change. And so even if you have old books, old field guides here, like this one, it's older, but I find this very useful. It's called Wildflowers, Ferns, and Grasses. And I find this one very useful for identifying weeds, actually, because they were considered wildflowers when this book was written, even if they weren't necessarily native to the area. But the age of the book doesn't really matter, because the plants and the way to identify the plants, how many petals they have, if their stems are hairy or not, really doesn't change. So if you are getting to know your book collection very well now that we're all home a lot more than we used to be, and you find that you have some plant identification guides getting dusty on the shelves, you might want to dust them off and go outside and try them out, because the information in it is still good. Even if it's not a shiny new book or on the internet, that book will still help you identify plants. And so there's two books that I'm going to use today to help me figure out who this plant is. And so the first thing you want to do is sort of get a good look at the plant. And so the flowers, when we have flowers on the plant, those are the easiest to help us identify a plant. If it didn't have any flowers, it might look a little bit more like a lot of different plants. And so having flowers on it really helps with clues. And so some of the clues that we're going to look at here, let's use this flower here. So we're going to look at the flower parts. So we want to count how many petals. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 petals. And we want to note the shape of those petals. We want to note that they're yellow and glossy. And all those little bumps around the center, those are the male reproductive parts of the flowers. Those are called stamens. And we want to note that there's a lot of them, and they're all kind of in a circle, right, around the center. And then we want to take a look at the back of the flower here. You could take a look at the back of the flower. And we see here that those are called sepals. The back of the flower, they're what used to cover the bud, and they're useful in identifying the plant. So whether or not they point backwards or kind of hug up against the flower, that is all helpful. If you can look really closely here, you might see also that they're a little hairy. And so that's a clue too. Any hairs on the plant is very helpful. And then we want to go down the stem. We're going to look at these leaves. And what we notice about these leaves is that they're divided. So there's 1 lobe, 2 lobes, and 3 lobes on these leaves. And the lobes, if we take a look at these lobes here, here's a bud, right? If we take a look at the lobes on these leaves, the lobes are stalked. And so you can see here, there's a stalk on that leaf. So you can tell I was gardening this morning and pulling weeds. I have dirt under my fingernail. That's okay, we're all gardeners. All right, so you can see there's 3 lobes, and then there's a stalk on that center lobe. So that's a good clue. And if we get closer in here, we might be able to see that there are hairs on the stems of this also. And so that's an important clue too. So now that we've taken a look at all of our clues, we've made notes about this. And now what we want to do is kind of open up our field guide. And a lot of field guides, this is Newcomb's Wildflower Guide here. And a lot of field guides have keys in them. And so a key helps you narrow down who this plant might be. The nice thing about these kinds of books too is they give you all the information you need. So the glossary, it tells you what the different words mean and the types of leaves you could be looking for and what those names are, so that when you're reading the pages, the clues, you know what they're talking about. So Newcomb's is divided into a locator key. So it starts by looking at the flower parts, because that is one of the easiest ways to tell the flowers. And so here this says irregular flowers. And wildflowers with no apparent leaves, but we're starting with irregular flowers. Now our flowers are pretty regular. We could cut them in half anyway, and they would be symmetrical. And so irregular flowers usually means that they are kind of odd shaped, not symmetrical. And so we know that this is not an irregular flower, so we want to look for regular flowers. So here we see irregular flowers continued. And then here we see flowers with 4 regular parts. Well, we counted our petals, and we know that we have 5 parts. And so we want to look for 5 regular parts. So here we are, flowers with 5 regular parts. So what we do is we start reading the clues here, and then this tells you the page number where we might find those clues, where we might find those plants. So we know that our flowers have 5 regular parts, but do they have no apparent leaves? Oh no, we have leaves. Do they have only basal leaves? Well, no, we saw leaves all the way up to along the flower. A basal leaf would be just at the base of the plant. And so we know that the flower has alternate leaves. And we know that the leaves are not entire. So entire means that there's no lobes and there's no serrations or anything like that. We know that ours has lobes because we saw that. And so we're going to change the page. And we're going to keep looking. And what we find is we have 5 regular parts with alternate leaves. And then we go down here, and that we see that the leaves are divided, right? The flowers are very small, under 1/4 inch. No, our leaves are about 1 inch long. And we know that because in our book, most field guides have a measuring tool. So you don't have to bring a ruler with you. And we can hold that measuring tool up to the flower and see that our flower is about 1 inch big. And so we know that our flower is about 1 inch big. So we know it's not small. And let's see, divided, flowers small, yellow flowers. And then we see that we have leaflets lobed or divided. So 242. So then we turn to that page, 242. This all takes practice, just like any other skill, right? And we see that here we have wild flowers with alternate leaves, leaves divided, yellow flowers, 1/4 inch or more wide, leaves palmate, the segments deeply lobed or divided. And so that is a description of our plant. And now we just have to figure out which one it is. So we know it's a ranunculus. And so it's related to buttercup. And so as I've read through these clues here, one thing I found and did some looking up, so hispid means hairy. And so that's a good clue that this might be the plant that I'm looking for because it has hairy stems. And also drier, rich woods and ledges. Petals are oblong, longer than wide. We certainly have that in our flower. And so what I'm thinking is that here we have Ranunculus hispidus, our hispid buttercup. It also flowers earlier in the year than almost all the other buttercups. And so that was a good clue too, since this is blooming in April and most of the other ones bloom in June and July, that was another clue. So that's another thing you could use is the timing of the flowering. So that is how you can use a field guide to help you identify a plant. And so I'm happy that I have a video now that if I forget the name of this plant again, I can just go back and remember who it is. There were some other options in here that were really similar, but because of the hairs on the stems and the shape of the fruit, there's actually a fruit here. I don't know if I'll be able to get it to zoom in for us. But because of the shape of the fruit here, those leaves with the stalk, those sepals that are kind of hugging the flower, and the oblong petals, and the height of this, that it's relatively short and sprawling, that I believe this is Ranunculus hispidus, the hispid buttercup. And so you can there's field guides out there that will help you identify any living thing. And so I hope this will help give you some confidence to get out there and explore and get to know the nature around you a little bit better. And until we can meet again in our botanical garden and at EarthFest Presents, where we're happy to answer all of the questions you have about nature in person. So again, I'm Kathy Salisbury, the director of the Ambler Arboretum of Temple University. Thank you for joining me today on this exploration of field guides. Take care and see you in the garden soon.